So Boston wins game 2, and I want you to think about your life for just a second. Now, I'm not going to some like deep sort of discussion here, but stay with me. Something that I think all human beings have in common. To some degree or another, we all have something called a bad habit. Everybody's got them. It can be as simple as biting your fingernails. I have a terrible bad habit of like really biting my lip when I'm getting nervous. Like if I'm watching a Golden State Warriors game, I kind of like bite the bottom of my lip. Like, no, it's like, Bryson, stop it. That doesn't help anything. It's not going to help the team win. It can be, not to go too dark, but it can be as serious though as smoking or something that could potentially be classified as an addiction, more than a bad habit. And when forced, everybody tries to break the bad habit, but when faced against adversity, when really put to the test, you see, okay, how far have you removed yourself from this bad habit? It's a tale of when you face adversity, how much does that bad habit come into the fray, or how much have you distanced yourself from it? And what the Dallas Mavericks, what's going on with them right now is the fact that Boston, because of their defense, and specifically on Boston's defense, more so the half-court defense, has put Dallas back into their old bad habits. What do I mean by that? Part of the reason that I have been as high on the Mavericks all season, or not, that's a lie, not all season long, because I don't even think I had Dallas making the playoffs this season coming in. But at about late March, early April, I did a list, like going into the playoffs or like toward the playoffs. I did my top 10 teams in the NBA. Top 10 teams in the NBA going in the playoffs. I had the Denver Nuggets at number 1. Clearly, I was wrong on that. They couldn't even get out of round 2. Couldn't even beat Minnesota of all teams. I had the Boston Celtics at number 2. I had the Dallas Mavericks at number 3. You can go back and look at it. That was my list. That was my top 3. And part of the reason for that was the fact that Dallas had gone from being a Luka-centric, it's Luka or die, number 77, we have to go through him in every way, shape, or form, or we are cooked because everything starts and ends with him. The ball dominance is off the charts. But over the last really post-All-Star break, ever since Jason Kidd makes some tweaks to the starting lineup, they added Daniel Gafford, who I thought played pretty well last night. They added P.J. Washington, who's been arguably their third best player this year in the playoffs. You now see a Dallas Mavericks team. You had seen a Dallas Mavericks team that was obviously Luka's the best player. Nobody's denying that. But it was giving Kyrie a better chance to be successful. You were seeing Derrick Jones Jr., the lob king. Daniel Gafford, the shot blocking extraordinaire. He also loves to catch lobs from Luka and Kyrie Irving. Because Boston's half-court defense has been led by Drew Holiday, led by Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown. And one thing that I really missed on this finals thus far was, okay, whoever guards Luka and Kyrie, man, offensively, they're just not going to be the same. Why I didn't factor in the fact, and props to Joe Mazzulla for saying, the heck, guys, I've got a bunch of long, athletic defenders, Tatum, Brown, obviously Derek White, Drew Holiday, who I've been a fan of for years. I love Drew Holiday. Even Porzingis can guard the pick and roll. He can, defend the perimeter if necessary, and we know the shot blocker extraordinaire that he is on the defensive end. He said, I'm just going to throw everybody at Luka and Kyrie. Wear them down with fresher defenders, which is a props to Joe Mazzulla, who I think has done a really, really good job coaching in this series. But it has been, because Dallas has actually played really good defense in this series. If you look at it, obviously they gave up 107 to Boston in game 1, 105 in game 2. In today's NBA, that's good defense. Now, you could argue Boston can't hit anything from three-point range, neither can Dallas. You have to imagine one of those two teams will get out of those shooting slumps, maybe as soon as game 3. Why Dallas isn't grabbing the ball off the rim, off a miss, because again, Boston missed plenty of threes. What did they go, 10 for 39? Last night, I believe, was the final box score. 10 of 39, 20, just over 25% did the Boston Celtics shoot from three-point range. Grab the ball off the rim and go. Now, some of that, we saw the block, which was it a foul? Maybe you can make a case. It's go either way. You know my rule. If it's a go either way play in the last 5 minutes of a game, don't call it. The block on, I guess it was P.J. Washington, down that end of the floor, down the left end of the floor by Derek White and Jaylen Brown, right? But kind of both got a hand on it. You could argue that the defensive presence of Boston has kind of affected those shots, but at the same time, we see the best out of Dallas. I've thrown out the stat time and time for about a month on this show. We could show it to you right here. When Luka Doncic is usage rate is 30% or below. The Dallas Mavericks are 10-0. They average 118 points per game. They give up about 108 points per game, which is about a little less. They're actually giving up less than that in this series. Luka's numbers are still great. 25, 9, and 8 on basically through roundup. 26, 10, and 8 on 46% for the field, darn near 40% from three-point range. They're a better basketball team, and Luka is just as great, even when they're not running absolutely everything through him. Which is why you're seeing a lesser Kyrie Irving to a degree in the series. Not to take the onus off of Kyrie. Kyrie has not played well, and clearly the Boston thing is really, really in his head. But that, to me, has been the biggest flaw that I've seen for the Dallas Mavericks in the series. And you give credit to Boston. You give credit to Brad Stevens, the executive of the year. And listen, Brad Stevens is probably the closest thing in the last decade in the modern NBA that we know it to be today. Brad Stevens, to me, might be the closest thing to Steve Kerr since Steve Kerr. Because people forget, before Coach Kerr was broadcasting at TNT and it was one of the most beloved announcers in the NBA, Steve Kerr ran the Phoenix Suns. Steve Kerr put together that Nash, Amari Stoudemire. Those were some great Suns teams that nearly beat the Lakers and could have easily won a championship in that span. Brad Stevens is almost like the reverse, except he's done it with the same organization, where he's an excellent coach. And his time in Boston realizes, okay, maybe my voice has rung a little hollow in the locker room. I'm going to step back, focus more on roster construction. Obviously, at Ime Udoka, that fizzled out for off-court reasons after a year. Then you have Joe Mazzulla, kind of a last-second hire because of the Udoka situation. And Brad Stevens, cool, calm, collected as he presents such an exterior. He's aggressive. And what I always say is this, and it's I don't know why more teams don't imply it. I guess fear of getting criticized by nobodies on the internet or local talk radio shows. My thing is, who cares? I'm in it to win it. Aggressive wins in sports. And sometimes it doesn't, but you gave it the go. I was on with my man Tim Barnard last night. Please go subscribe to the Grid Network, which is where his podcast is at. Follow him on social media, Boston Sports Summit. He did a live stream reaction to Game 2 last night. Massive Celtics fan. I was on his show throughout the fourth quarter. And he's not exactly the biggest Marcus Smart fan. And sort of what I was saying was like, Celtics made a finals with Marcus Smart. They made a handful of Eastern Conference finals with Marcus Smart. But they saw, okay, Tatum's great. By and large, tends to be great in the playoffs. I've done segments on that in this show. More on Tatum later in the show in his final struggles. Jaylen Brown, really good, can be great. Roster, really good. We added Derek White, Al Horford came back, all of this. But we're just not, because Tatum, as great as he is not a Luka, it's not a Jokic, it's not a Giannis. I've always said that. May need to add just a couple more pieces. And we take a big swing with Kristaps Porzingis, which I remember talking about last June when that move got made. I'm like, it's risky. Porzingis has the injury history, but I know what it looks like with Marcus Smart. There's a ceiling on that. At least give it a go with Porzingis. Now, Porzingis is hurt in the series, which could be proved to be, hurtful to Boston. We'll see what happens as time goes on. But then the big one. The Boston Celtics take Drew Holiday from what was believed to be at the time he went to Portland, but eventually ended up in Boston through the Dame trade. What was thought to be the biggest contender and the biggest threat to the Boston Celtics. They took their best defender, their best two-way player, second best two-way player to Giannis, in Drew Holiday, who, again, I've been a fan of Drew for a long time. He was, to me, the MVP of this game for Boston. Drew Holiday last night, how about 26 points and 11 rebounds, 11 for 14 from the field, 2 for 4 from three-point range. I believe he was the only outside Peyton Pritchard who hit the half-court shot at the end of the third quarter. Drew Holiday, only Celtic to shoot over 50% from three-point range, which isn't saying much because the rest shot horribly from three. Aggressive wins in sports. I've always liked the Celtics roster construction. It's the very reason I had them going to the finals before the season. And they've taken Dallas not only out of their comfort zone, but when someone's taken out of their comfort zone, a lot of times they will revert back to bad habits. That is what the Mavericks are doing. And it's why part of the reason I picked Dallas to win the series, which for the record, I'm going to look this camera dead center. And this mic right in front of me and say, I still believe the Mavericks win the series. Why do I believe that? A, because I believe in pick integrity. You do not move off a pick until your pick is either proven correctly or goes down into the ocean with no life found, is the fact that Luka's been great, but Luka's always great. Look at his playoff numbers. Luka's always great in the playoffs with few exceptions. That in the fourth quarter of this series, and I'll show you all stats provided by our friends at StatMuse, all graphics provided by my man Alfred Parsard Jr. My belief is this. Because like Jason Kidd's a great coach, I think we'll make the requisite adjustments in terms of pushing the ball in transition more often, and we'll play more of a fast, up-tempo style of offense. Put up the number of what Kyrie and Luka is doing in the fourth quarter of this series. It's anti-everything they've been in the playoffs. Luka and Kyrie combined the fourth quarter of these NBA Finals. 10 points, 5 assists, 3 turnovers, 3 for 10 from the field, 0 for 4 from three-point range. My guess and my belief is that going to this more team-oriented with Luka as the head of the snake offense, which they've been running for a long time, for the last 2 to 3 months or so, Luka won't have to be as relied upon, especially given that he's beat up. You'll then see a better Kyrie. I think Kyrie being back on his home floor in Boston will settle him down a little bit. The Boston thing, again, is clearly in his head. He doesn't seem to be embracing, which I know the history is different. I understand that. But he doesn't seem to be embracing it the way a Kobe did, the way a Steph Curry did, the way a LeBron James did. Now, for the record, Kyrie's obviously not on that level. But you would like to see maybe him sort of channel that into, I'm going to use this as like a springboard to me playing well. The Boston sort of back and forth, as opposed to it's the only thing I'm focusing on. So I think I'm going to predict game 3 later in the show. I still think Dallas is going to win this series. I do not move off that pick because I believe in pick integrity, and I do believe they're a matchup they can still exploit. But kudos to the Boston Celtics. This has to do with roster construction. This has to do with the fact that, like any great basketball, like any great professional team or person in any competitive field, the truly great ones take you out of what you're comfortable doing and revert you back to bad habits. And that's what Boston's done, and you give them massive credit for it. Thanks so much for watching the show on YouTube, and be sure to go click that big red subscribe button and check out the other clips and full shows from Carving It Up Live, as well as our other incredible content creators here on the Grid Network.